Welcome to another episode of the KLC Center for Effective Preaching Podcast. I am Tyshawn Gardner. I serve as Associate Professor of Preaching at Truett Seminary here at Baylor University and Assistant Director of the KLC Center for Effective Preaching. I am humbled and honored today to have our guest, Dr. Dominique Robinson, with us. There's so much we want to talk about, want to get to know about you. But first, let me thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to share this space with you, and welcome to Texas.
There may be the small chance that there's someone watching who is not familiar with you or your work. Very important work, which we'll talk about, especially iHomiletic. But let us know a little bit about your upbringing, where you're from, family, all the things that you would like to share.
Awesome. Thank you again. So Dominique Aisha Robinson, I always give that middle name because Dominique means of God, Aisha, woman of God. I highly doubt my mom knew that's what she was doing when she gave me that name, but I remember having a moment of looking up my name, and now so I go by the full name for my own kind of thing. Born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, Brick City. So anybody who watched New Jersey Drive, yes, we learned how to steal cars at 13, you know. Born and raised in Newark, New Jersey. I am the oldest of 3 children.
Okay.
My mom, Barbara Smith, and my dad, who, bonus dad, raised me. His mother, Della Victoria Smith, was my pastor growing up. So I grew up Pentecostal in a small storefront church. It started storefront church, and then it grew into a larger faith community. And I actually attribute much of my faith formation identity to both of my grandmothers. So my mom's mom, Southern Baptist Belle, who may not have believed in women in ministry, but I always heard Mahalia Jackson on the record player. And then my dad's mom, who was Pentecostal, fiery. And interestingly enough, though she was the leader of the church, her rhetoric was still a matter of, I'm in place because the man is not in place. And so I was introduced to God through these 2 strong women in an urban context. And then both of my parents are 1 of 10. So I'm from a very large family, 9 aunts and uncles on both sides, and then my brother and my sister, who I love dearly. And so that was my upbringing. I went to my mom's mother's Baptist church in the morning, Bethany Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey. And then I went to my dad's mom's church in the evenings that lasted all night long.
Okay. I said all day, you said all night.
All night long, yes. So that's a lot of my upbringing, you know, and in good old-fashioned Pentecostal, no makeup, head covering, no jewelry, no pants. And so I was the kid that nobody thought would actually ever be the preacher or get saved because I was wearing the pants under the skirt, playing basketball with the guys, trying to throw my sneakers in underneath the hoop to put on my little kids to come back and go to church, you know, long skirts and doilies. And so I grew up on that. That's how I've grown up.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So tell us about your educational journey, where you matriculated, how has that been?
So, you know, interestingly enough, coming up in a Pentecostal church, or at least in that Pentecostal church, education really wasn't pushed a lot.
Right.
And so, you know, I was just, you know, going to school. I happened to be a decent student with a smart mouth. So I, you know, did well academically and spent a lot of time in detention, which put me in spaces with professors or teachers at that time who were invested. They still wanted me to do well. So they were introduced to me to schools in ways that I didn't even know they were doing at the time. When I turned 18, my dad's mom transitioned. And so I remember feeling like I was grown. I wanted to leave the church. And so 2 of my very best friends, in light of being put out of plenty of schools, I wound up going to West Orange High School, bumped into 2 young ladies who were Amy Zion. One whose mom was the pastor of her church. Frances Murray Williams pastored Clint Memorial Amy Zion Church. So at 18, I joined the Amy Zion Church. And it was there that they were pushing education enough for me to feel like I should go to college and consider some other things. And so joining the Amy Zion Church as they were, you know, because I was ordained at 13. I was a preaching evangelist at 13. And so I joined them at 18. They were like, oh, no, you're going to have to go through the ministers in training. And we believe in education. So if you want to be ordained, you want to finish a bachelor's degree and 2 years of theological training to get your elders' orders. And so it was through that community that kind of directed me to go to school. I did go to Penn State for 2 years, played basketball and volleyball, and then transferred to Georgetown and finished up my undergraduate program studying political science. That is where I was introduced to womanism.
Okay.
Professor Diana Hayes was on the faculty at the time and used to be an AME Zionite.
Forged in the fire?
Yes. And interestingly enough, I had transferred as an athlete, but didn't have enough credits to graduate, but she was at the table.
Okay, she was at the table.
At the table.
Representation
matters. And was able to advocate for me, pull me aside, asked me to take her class and to do an extra independent study to gain the credit I needed to graduate.
Wow.
So it was in her class being introduced to womanism, as well, embodiment language, but because she was also AME Zionite, she was able to use the language I needed to kind of help me navigate. And she said, you need to go to seminary. And specifically said, Candler, where Teresa Farr Brown is. She said, I'm gonna tell her you're on your way. And I was like, well, I've been preaching since I was 13. I want a law degree. I don't want it. No, I can preach without a piece of paper. And she was adamant about it. And I trusted her because she saved me. You know, she helped me finish. And so at her suggestion and recommendation, or however we want to say it, along with the support of Bishop Nathaniel Jarrett out of Chicago, who was my presiding bishop at the time, he dropped off my recommendation letter in person. Dean Shonda Jones was the dean at the time at Candler, and she jokes around about it all the time and says, I don't know if we admitted you on your own merit, but I want to know who was it that a bishop would come in person and drop off the recommendation letter. And so I got to Candler, and I get there, and it was the first time I had seen so many African-American faculty persons, professors, because I went to Penn State and Georgetown, and if I'm honest, the majority of my faculty were not Black. I had Dr. Diana Hayes and Condoleezza Rice when I was at Georgetown, and so I get to Candler, and my mind is blown to see so many Black faculty persons teaching theology with solid jobs. Because at the time, for me, preaching was the side gig. It wasn't going to pay the bills, but they were showing me that
you can do this full time.
Yes.
Right.
And that your mind does matter. So I get there, and I'm still preaching in the circuit and doing Church of God in Christ, AME. I'm moving around and preaching, and I'm working at this law firm. And somewhere in the middle of that, I decided maybe I should see what this church thing is really about. And the walking Howard Thurman, Luther Smith, recommends that I go to AAR my second year. I get there, I attend the Black Religious Scholars Group meeting, and I'm surrounded by all of y'all, because all of y'all, you were there, all of y'all, and I'm like, oh, it can happen. It's a thing. And it fuels you and it feeds you. And so literally by example, I said, oh, this is something I should be able to try to pursue. So I finished my MDiv at Candler School of Theology. I did my THM. Dr. Farr Brown took me under her wing, along with all the other Black faculty, quite honestly. They treated you like family. They invested in you.
That's important.
Yeah, and for someone who didn't go to HBCU, I was able to still get that within the city that was a mecca, because, there was ITC, so I was still able to kind of go over. Dr. Jacqueline Grant and Mark Lomax, they're over there teaching. And Marcia Riggs was at Columbia Theological Seminary, so I felt like I was surrounded. I had no choice but to do well in the city where there were Black theologians thriving and practicing, not just teaching from the ivory tower, but also doing it. So I was able to see it in practice, and it was great. The AME Zion Church gave me structure and support. It was a connectional church. They showed up. The bishop didn't just write a letter. He sent money to make sure I was able to still matriculate and graduate, and so it was helpful. I served at Shaw Temple AME Zion Church while I was there. And so did that, and then got a job at Columbia Theological Seminary for 6 years, where I was also able to earn my doctorate of ministry. And so there, Ralph Watkins, Marcia Riggs poured into me, Kalia Williams helped me to continue to matriculate. But the whole time I was still able to be a research assistant, a teaching assistant for Dr. Farr Brown at Candler. So preaching became life, and I didn't even know that it was happening. I just knew it was feeling good, and it was working, and it was balanced. It wasn't easy, but there was a village, and the people showed up and continued to support me, correct me, and love me. And so that's my educational kind of background. And so that D-Min there at Columbia is where iHomiletic moved, formed, and shaped, and finished that in 2017. And in 2020, I was beginning a PhD program at Christian Theological Seminary under the Reverend Dr. Frank A. Thomas, who is good friends with the Reverend Dr. Teresa Fry Brown. And so it felt right. And I can say now, I can testify now, like, oh, it has worked for my good.
Right.
Did not always feel good,
right.
but it has worked for my good. So that's where I studied, and that's who has shaped and formed me.
So tell me about iHomiletic. Tell me, what is it, and what gave you this idea, this innovative idea?
Oh, man. The first answer I can say now, post-pandemic, is a missed opportunity to be rich is what iHomiletic feels like right now. Right. The unpublished book that should have been published. But I had the incredible opportunity to serve as youth pastor at several churches in the city of Atlanta while I was studying and writing and things of that nature. So I served as a youth pastor at Shaw Temple AME Zion Church, at Providence Missionary Baptist Church after Pastor Durley with Damon Williams, on Cascade, at New Life Presbyterian Church with Billy Honor, right by, on a corridor with Creflo Dollar's ministry. And so I was able to serve at these different churches, and what I was discovering was that so many Black millennials and younger, but particularly millennials, we were in church physically, but we were not in church mentally and emotionally, physically, and I only felt obligated to go because I was a preacher. And so I began to wonder what was happening with our generation. Preaching was happening, but it didn't feel like it was meeting us, or at least giving us space for the rage that we were feeling with Black Lives Matter movement, living in the city of Atlanta. Like, it was so iHomiletic was literally birthed out of me trying to find scholarship to support my praxis. And that's the blessing of the doctorate of ministry, that you can actually study the work that you're doing, like the praxis. It makes it the practical degree, right? Or a practical degree. And so being able to do the doctorate of ministry allowed me to practice what it is I was already doing, but find some theory and scholarship to support it, to say, well, here's the system, the methodology. And so I basically interviewed over 3,000 Black youth along the East Coast corridor, both in interviews, informal interviews, formal interviews, using social media and technology. And the question was, in essence, where could I meet them? They were already in a social media world. So then how do I meet them there, or use that for them to connect back to the church? So iHomiletic was birthed out of me realizing that I could use social media, particularly Twitter at the time, which was kind of the popular one at the time, that and Periscope, to form proclamation to meet that generation. But then it became like an evangelical tool, or for evangelism. Evangelism, where people now are meeting us outside the walls of the church. And so using Twitter, I was basically saying, so if I can't get it to you in 140 characters, then you don't get it. Not 140 words, not 140 characters, you don't get it. So the driving question really became parallel to, like, we need to be developing sermons like Apple. You need to make it concise, sleek, compact, user-friendly, and the key part for us in Black preaching is always ready for an upgrade. Apple has a way of sending software updates to your device.
They do.
And at a certain point, your device can't handle the upgrade. And then you are forced to purchase a new device. So then Apple becomes attractive because you keep feeling new and keep feeling upgraded, and it's so it changes. The colors are coming out, and it's happening every September. So you're waiting for the refresh in the fall season, the autumn season transition. You're waiting for it. You wait for the bugs to work out, and you buy it for Christmas.
That's right.
Right. So then if it's like, what about Apple can we make then and put into our sermon development? And so with Apple being how it is, I realized they didn't own the little I. And it was funny. I was asked to write an article, for like a blog post, and I did. And before we knew the word viral, it went viral.
Wow.
Dr. Fry Brown called. Stop writing outside of your dissertation to focus. But in light of it, because of where it went, I wound up getting an intellectual property attorney. We trademarked it so that we could secure it, and then kept writing. So then when I finished the degree, it became consulting services and instructional services. And now as a preaching professor and a doctoral student, I can say it's my methodology. I can say I literally, so I ask the questions now, when you look at social media platforms, whichever one is most popular, what about it makes it popular? How do we use that then for sermon form? So right now, people would say TikTok is the leading social media platform, right? What makes TikTok attractive? TikTok allows you to create content that is brief, repetitive, culturally relevant because it has some sort of song and or music,
Yes.
right? So then preaching, brief, culturally relevant, and allows you to be able to duplicate it for discipleship. So then you keep pulling from it. So if you go to Facebook, what was it? The avatar, the creating. So in essence is what aspects of social media platforms make it successful? How do we pull that into sermon formation, and then keep the culturally relevant component for the day and age?
So I want to talk to you about womanism and especially a womanist hermeneutic and homiletic. So how would you define womanism and your embrace of that? How does it infect your reading of the text and your preaching of the message?
Again, I was introduced to womanism when I was a senior in college with Dr. Diana Hayes, so I had never heard of it, but then I realized I was living it, that my grandmothers were womanists and probably didn't even know it, even though the rhetoric was different, right? So for one grandmother, she was speaking that the man should have been in place, but she was the one in place. For my mom's mom, she didn't believe women should be preachers, but we had the Holy Ghost still. So like they still were infusing me with womanism in ways that they did or did not know. And so how beyond the kind of textbook definition of womanist preaching or womanism, I would certainly just argue that it is the added layer of inclusion for the already marginalized and oppressed.
Beautiful.
You know, I would argue that yes, it centers the experience of the Black woman, but for the goal of centering all of us who've never been centered before. And so that's how I would see it. Now the millennial in me pushes further for generations of womanism, where I still think in some ways the traditional understanding of womanism or embodiment of womanism could still be patriarchal in ways, in that there still is a respectability politic. And here we are in 2024 around gender fluidity and identity, where I'm not sure the earlier waves or generations of womanists are at a place to include it. But that's where I think millennial womanism creates space to say, you can wear your bodycon dress and preach. We're not really mad at you doing that. We're not upset at what you identify to be as far as your gender. We want to hear your ethic and we want to hear inclusion. And so I think that womanism says, wherever you have been invisible, we want you to be visible, and we want you to have the power and the agency to do that and carve space for that. And so because that's how I see it, I do believe that when I read anything really, but particularly scripture, I do believe I see it through, I would call shaded ovarian spectacles. I'm Black, so I got shades on. So the first thing I'm seeing is the brown people moving in the Bible. You can't convince me otherwise. Egypt, Africa, bet we're good, right? And then the ovarian spectacles, I'm always trying to figure out who's unknown, not just the women, but who's unknown or unseen or not focused on. How did they bring a particular perspective to the text? So I think that helps me with seeing it differently, so to speak. But as far as preaching it and embodying it, I have a ball being able to be in aesthetic, the millennial who looks cool, but at the same time when I speak, you can tell my grandmother raised me. All right, so I like being the bridge of that moment of, oh man, I was the dean of chapel at Wiley College, and so college students taught me how to be cool. I still don't know how to be cool. That's how I knew I couldn't be a youth pastor no more. I said, oh, no, I don't even, what is Riz? I don't even know what you're saying to me right now. Tell me what sneakers I should be wearing with this outfit. So they helped me look cool, but it's my grandmother's praying practices that show up. So when I preach, I got the young people who are able to say, I can rock with her. And then I got the older saints to say, now, wait a minute. She's sat with somebody. And so I think that is what shows up in my womanist embodiment in the preaching that's helpful. Yeah,
such a beautiful hybrid. Right? Thank you for being with us today. Thank you. Please check this out, share it with your friends, but most of all, subscribe to the Cow Lake Center for Effective Preaching Podcast. Until next time, thank you.